My name is Tim Crook. I'm a senior project manager at Regen. Regen has a very clear goal. We're accelerating the transition to a more decarbonised, decentralised and more democratic energy system. We do that by convening the right people to come up with ideas to achieve that change, who otherwise wouldn't be able to achieve that alone. So we sort of inject some technical, financial and policy knowledge to help people make the most of their low energy opportunities. The Building Local Economic Resilience through Democratic Local Energy Models project, funded by Friends Provident, was a project looking at what could be next for community energy groups in the UK. The idea being that many groups had done some brilliant projects, often funded through the feed-in tariff, which saw some quite heavy cuts in recent years. So the idea was to work with some of those groups and assess what project models might be viable for them now and over the next couple of years. So the project was a partnership project with Regen as lead partner, and we had 1010 campaign group, Forum for the Future and Community Energy England, who were partners on the project too. So the key lessons and findings from that project really were there is no replacement model that is generic that groups can take forward, modify for their own circumstances and develop. Community energy is very site-specific and relies hugely on the individual circumstances that those groups have and find, and the sorts of assets that they have in their areas, the sorts of relationships they have with their local authorities, etc. So the project really underline those findings that there are still viable project options available, but there's no real replacement for those groups doing that heavy lifting to work through what they might be on their own terms. So having a clear idea of the project outputs they want to achieve, not just economic, is hugely important. We have a number of key barriers that are holding up that transition to a more decarbonised, decentralised and democratic energy system. Some of them are purely the technical, so the type of network that we have is very difficult to modernise quickly. It's going to be a very long process to enable that network to support some of these new project types. Some of the barriers are age-old, in particular our attitudes towards the energy system in the UK are relatively different to what we find in the rest of Europe, for example. Our attitudes towards long-term investment and how we combine electricity and heat sources of energy, for example. We find that those barriers, they're not easy to break down, and they have to be done in a cooperative sense. There are many stakeholders that hold important roles in all of those things, and the only way we're going to make progress is by bringing them together, learning what the other stakeholder needs in that particular equation, and then bringing forward some innovative new ideas, and that isn't something that happens overnight. So the key things for groups or individuals that want to get into community energy, or maybe even start their own group, are certainly to be clear about what it is you want to achieve. Some groups are able to deliver projects that aren't economically viable, and they do them because they want some of the additionality or some of the other benefits that might bring, and that might be helping engage some of the most vulnerable people in their communities, helping address fuel poverty, or possibly even just growing links between things like local schools or local retail. So being really clear about what it is you want that group to achieve is certainly a fundamental. And secondly is make sure you learn from other groups. There's a large number of peer-to-peer networks or organisations that help groups learn from each other and not have to reinvent the wheel the whole time. So make sure straight away you get plugged into those networks so that you can learn from other groups who are doing great projects. The key aims for Regen for the next 12 months are to continue supporting the network of community energy groups that we have been supporting over the last few years through this project and through others. We are now finding that much of our work is focused on the whole energy system as opposed to focused on standalone heat issues or looking at difficulties and barriers on the national grid, for example. There's a huge amount of focus on electric vehicles, for example. How are they going to impact the whole energy system, and how can we use some of these more disruptive technologies to build a more resilient and more democratic energy system? So we've certainly been seeing an increase in that type of work over the last 6 months, and I think we're going to be doing an awful lot more in examining and assessing how we might progress that sort of holistic energy system over the next year.